I'm not joking in the slightest when I say that these wide receivers are terrifying. Now, it's not that you should just go through and avoid every single one of these players in your drafts this year, because hell, those guys that don't have access to any upside, how can they scare you? I mean, just avoid them. Never think about them for a single second. But no, these are players that I haven't been drafting a lot because I think they are overvalued in fantasy football drafts. But we can talk about their ceiling, and I can walk through a case where they could come out, they could straight up crush me, and I could be crying at the end of the day because my bank account hit zero and we are declaring bankruptcy. But before we dive into these wide receivers, make sure you go down there, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. Drop a like on this video if you're already subscribed. That way we get recommended to someone who is not subscribed, because if we hit 90,000 subscribers before the season starts, we will fire up that 24-hour live stream. 24-hour live draft marathon. And also, thank you so much for all the support. I'm going to be spending my day responding to every single comment, or at least the first 200 comments left in this video. But that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into these wide receivers. Starting off with a wide receiver that I have ranked inside our top 24. Like, he does have a crap ton of upside here. Mike Williams. Now, with Mike Williams, I mean, right now, I have not found myself drafting a lot of him just simply because of the price point. You have him being drafted on Underdog Fantasy right now as a wide receiver 14, neck and neck with Keenan Allen. I see Mike Williams go directly before Keenan Allen all the time. He's going before elite level onesie position guys like Josh Allen. He's going before a Kyle Pitts. And I can 100% admit the upside, because if we go through, if we look at Keenan Allen in particular, we can see that Keenan Allen has straight up dominated, and I repeat, he has dominated Mike Williams throughout really their entire careers. And where has he dominated them? In the volume category, which is exactly what you're wanting to see. You're wanting to see that wide receiver go out there, try to get to 9-10 targets a game like Keenan Allen has. But it looks like Keenan Allen may be losing a step. Now, Keenan Allen's about to be going into his, 9th NFL season? I believe the man was drafted in 2013. So it would make sense to see some regression from Keenan Allen and his overall athletic profile. The red flag that we have is not the points per game last year. It's not even going to be the targets per game, the receiving yards per... No. It's his air yards per game. If you don't know what air yards are, essentially how far the wide receiver is targeted downfield. Like, if you draw your target 15 yards from the line of scrimmage, you have 15 air yards. You can pick up some yards after the catch, of course, which we love to see, but it just lets you know, very similar to an average depth of target, where the wide receiver is operating. And Keenan Allen has seen his air yards just straight up plummet over the past 3 seasons. I mean, this is a wide receiver that's gone from, oh, dear God, 98 to 78 and 49 this past year. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we know Mike Williams is being used as a deep threat. Mike Williams has averaged 100 air yards per game over the final 3 seasons. So a lot of people are looking at this situation and they are projecting that Mike Williams is a wide receiver that's the deep threat option in a Justin Herbert-led offense. Obviously, he's massive. He's the guy with touchdown upside, and people think that Mike Williams is the wide receiver you should be drafting. Now, I am behind consensus on Mike Williams because I always want to take 10 steps back when we're evaluating players. I think that we can get so far into the weeds, we can look at such small samples that it's very hard to just have a baseline expectation for said player. And if we look at Mike Williams over the past 3 seasons, he's been the wide receiver 40 on a points per game basis. He was drafted in 2017. Same draft class as Cooper Kupp, Juju Smith-Schuster, Leonard Fournette, Alvin Kamara, James Conner. I mean, names that we've known for a very long time in the NFL. Christian McCaffrey in that draft class as well. So I think that if you're coming out trying to make an argument for Mike Williams, who's also a 4th-year player coming out of Clemson, to finally have this breakout this far into his NFL career, it's a pretty tough argument to be making that we need to be drafting him as a low-end wide receiver 1 in fantasy, especially if we are taking that step back and also looking at his involvement in the Los Angeles Chargers offense through the first 5 weeks this past season versus the second half of the year. We saw the upside. I saw the fact that Mike Williams can bury me in fantasy football through the first 5 weeks. Hell, Mike Williams, 23 points per game. And I was loving live because I did draft a lot of Mike Williams last year. Not this year, but last year we did. 23 points per game through the first 5 weeks. What was the difference? Mike Williams was operating as the Alpha X receiver. He was being used all over the football field. He was running some routes closer to the line of scrimmage. He wasn't just out there clearing space for Eckler, for Keenan Allen underneath. Where in the final 11 weeks of the season, you see that average depth of target take a dramatic step up, and you see Mike Williams going from the wide receiver 2 overall to the wide receiver 36, right in line with what we had in 2019, right in line with what we had in 2020. Now, no, I do not think Mike Williams is a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. I have him ranked as a mid wide receiver 2. I just am not drafting a lot of them, because you have to take him over the elite tight end in Kyle Pitts. You have to take him over Keenan Allen, really, if you want him as well. So I'll take him if he falls to the beginning of the 4th round. But where he's going right now at the beginning of the 3rd, I'm off of Mike Williams. And our next wide receiver being drafted in a very similar range is Allen Robinson. Now, with Allen Robinson, this is an option that 100% we can see the ceiling with. I mean, I have him ranked as a top 24 wide receiver, of course. And this is a wide receiver that if we take that step back, he was the wide receiver 12 in 2019. He was the wide receiver 10 in 2020. And he has dealt with the worst quarterback play you could ever imagine since 2014. Since 2014, he's played 46 games with Blake Bortles, 36 games with Mitchell Trubisky, 10 games with Justin Fields, 8 games with Nick Foles, 6 games with Andy Dalton, 3 games with Chase Daniel, and 3 games with Chad Henne. He is now getting Matthew Stafford. He is now getting Super Bowl winning Matthew Stafford, the best quarterback play by far and away of his NFL career. And still, if we're looking at underdog fantasy, his ADP of wide receiver 18, so right there's a mid wide receiver 2. It's very hard for me to buy into that price tag because with Allen Robinson, yes, you could blame the failure on the situation last year, which is fair to do. He had to play with Justin Fields and Matt Nagy. But you know who also had to deal with that? Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney going into year 2 dominated in Chicago over Allen Robinson. Significantly higher yards per route run, significantly more air yards per game, significantly more receiving yards per game, a significantly higher target, a higher touchdown rate. He was better than him across the board in year 2 in the same situation. And if we're remembering exactly how bad Allen Robinson was last year, take a guess on how many of these wide receivers I'm about to mention outscored Allen Robinson on a points per game basis. T.Y. Hilton, Braxton Berrios, Khalif Raymond, Danny Amendola. How many of those receivers do you think outscored Allen Robinson last season on a points per game basis? Well, let me give you the answer. 4. All of them did. So I agree. I think he does take that bounce back step with Matthew Stafford under center, but he has a 0% chance to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. They may sign Odell Beckham Jr. They have Van Jefferson. They have a couple nice running backs. They have a tight end. He's never going to get to a 25, 26% team target share here. So I'm going to be fading Allen Robinson. If we check out his ADP on Underdog, he's going back-to-back with Ezekiel Elliott. He's going, sometimes before Jalen Waddle. Some wide receivers that I've ranked ahead of him. Guys like Terry McLaurin, Hollywood Brown. I would even take a Breece Hall over him. Give me Breece Hall over Allen Robinson any day of the week. But real quick, if you want to get in an extra draft this offseason, if you want to draft with us in the live stream, the best place for you to do that is going to be over there on Underdog Fantasy. That's where we mention all the ADP because more money is drafted on Underdog Fantasy than any other platform. So in my opinion, it's probably going to be the best ADP. And when you go to sign up on Underdog Fantasy to fire up some best ball drafts, whether that's with your friends in the public lobby, with me on a live stream, hell, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. So it's essentially free. And if you make a minimum of a $10 deposit, you get our 2022 Fantasy Football Draft Guide and our 2022 Fantasy Football Rankings. Literally a 300-page draft guide for $10. That's essentially free. Go take advantage. Link in the description, link in the comment section. But let's move over to our next wide receiver. Y'all should know who's on this list. Cortland Sutton. Now, with Cortland Sutton, I honestly would have left him off if it wasn't for the Tim Patrick injury. I mean, before the Tim Patrick injury, I didn't think that Cortland Sutton could go out there and bury us. I even made a bet that if Cortland Sutton, who right now is being drafted as the wide receiver 16, if he ended up being the wide receiver 10 or better in fantasy, I would buy a Cortland Sutton jersey, hang it up in the studio. And now that Tim Patrick's down, I think Cortland Sutton could go out there and crush us because there are some positive signs on this profile. We go back to 2019, 2.2 yards per route run. I mean, 98 air yards per game over the past 2 seasons. But why I'm not drafting Cortland Sutton is because you can get Jerry Jeudy a full round later. I know you have reports coming out of camp saying, oh, Cortland Sutton's the wide receiver 1 in Denver. I'm going to look at what we actually had on the field. And if we're looking at what we actually had on the field, Jerry Jeudy, a better prospect coming out of college, which I know not many people are going to care about that. But nonetheless, when they did play together, Jerry Jeudy was easily the wide receiver 1. Jerry Jeudy, 46 receiving yards per game. Cortland Sutton, 23 receiving yards per game. Cortland Sutton, 4.5 points per game compared to Jerry Jeudy at 8.5. You can get Jerry Jeudy a full round later. I currently have Cortland Sutton ranked as the wide receiver 19. I have Jerry Jeudy ranked as the wide receiver 18 because hell yeah, this Denver Broncos passing offense should be very good and it should be more concentrated now that you don't have Tim Patrick in it. I'm just never going to draft Cortland Sutton this year because of that. And our next wide receiver is someone that, oh my gosh, I shouldn't say he scares me because I don't think Allen Lazard can ever win a league this year. I don't think Allen Lazard is going to be the league-winning player. You can clip this. You can throw this in my face all year next year if I end up being wrong. But this is a wide receiver right now that's being drafted before DeAndre Hopkins, Joe Burrow, Devonta Smith, Kadarius Toney, Russell Wilson, Tony Pollard, Christian Kirk, Hunter Renfrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Antonio Gibson, Tom Brady. Like, there are so many players right now going behind Allen Lazard that I would prefer. And with Allen Lazard, I'll admit, on paper, he's the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. And the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay is always something you want to have. I mean, this is a wide receiver that gets elite level quarterback play. We know that he should also have a significantly higher touchdown rate than league average, just given the amount of trips to the red zone that you're going to have with Aaron Rodgers here. But with Lazard, my issue is I don't think he is guaranteed to be the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. He's the wide receiver 1 on paper, like I said, but fantasy football and the NFL in general has so much variance that I don't think it's properly calculated in the odds that you have Christian Watson as the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay, that you have Romeo Doubs as the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay, that they disperse this target share between Robert Tonyan, Aaron Jones, maybe they run the ball more with A.J. Dillon, then also get Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Sammy Watkins, all the ball. I don't think Allen Lazard has any chance to go through and slide into this same Davante Adams type role. Here with Lazard, let's just remember that this is a wide receiver that was an undrafted free agent, signed to the Jags. They saw nothing special with him. They let go of him. He went over to Green Bay, and since then, he's never commanded targets at a high rate. Since then, he's never posted really a great yards per route run. Like, there's nothing on this Allen Lazard profile that screams that he is a very talented wide receiver outside of some reports in training camp saying that he's the wide receiver 1, which I agree. He's the wide receiver 1 on paper here, but so much can change through the course of the season. So right now, I'm not ever drafting him. 1.4 yards per route run last year, 1.7 yards per route run over the past 3. There's no reason for me to be taking him ahead of someone like a DeAndre Hopkins. Like, think about that. Allen Lazard is being drafted before DeAndre Hopkins. Let's move on. Now, our next wide receiver is going to be Gabriel Davis. Gabriel Davis, another player with a lot of upside. I mean, hell, he's attached to an elite level quarterback there in Buffalo. And with Gabriel Davis, we saw that upside, 201 receiving yards in a single game against the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoff game. Oh my gosh. Gabriel Davis could hit to an extreme measure, which is making drafters very excited about him. But my issue with Gabriel Davis is this is a wide receiver that was not able to get on the field. He was not able to play over 33, 34-year-old Emmanuel Sanders last year. I think Isaiah McKenzie and Jamison Crowder take essentially all those targets that you had from Cole Beasley. So I know it does look like a crap ton of targets are available here in Buffalo with the departure of both Cole Beasley as well as Emmanuel Sanders. But I think, honestly, those Beasley targets aren't going to be going over towards Gabriel Davis. I think Gabriel Davis does pick up what you had from an Emmanuel Sanders, But hell, I mean, if he's adding that on to his production from last year, it's not like Gabriel Davis is set to be just a wide receiver seeing 8, 9 targets per game. This is a wide receiver that back-to-back seasons has had a great touchdown rate. I mean, touchdown rate over 10%. It's probably something you can project, just considering the fact that here in Buffalo, we know that everybody should have a higher touchdown rate than league average with how much this team's actually going to score. Outside of that, he was a wide receiver drafted on day 3, has one, yes, I'll admit, very, very flashy game on his resume where we do want to go through. We do want to root for the guy, but as it stands, I have Gabriel Davis ranked behind guys like, I mean, a perfect example for this is going to be Deontay Johnson, and Deontay Johnson's being drafted behind Gabriel Davis on Underdog Fantasy. There's no reason for me to ever draft Gabriel Davis unless I took Josh Allen in round 3 and then we can get like Gabriel Davis in round 5. Now let's move over to our next wide receiver, Chase Claypool. I think this is a trending pick. I don't think we have to really talk about this much, but we did tweet out a couple weeks ago, this is before that George Pickens hype really picked up, that I think George Pickens could end up being the wide receiver 2 here in Pittsburgh. I think that's likely the case now that we've seen this George Pickens hype and we've seen George Pickens perform during the preseason as well. And if we're just projecting out 9, 10 targets a game for Deontay Johnson like we've seen over the past 2 years, even with the quarterback change, and we are projecting that Pat Freiermuth is going to have a nice role, and then all of a sudden that Chase Claypool may be fighting for the wide receiver 2 job in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. We don't even know if that wide receiver 2 job's worth anything. Hell, like someone that's going in that same range that I just easily prefer, like give me Tyler Boyd over Chase Claypool. I mean, with Tyler Boyd, I know he's the wide receiver 3 in his own offense, but that offense should have significantly more production. You're not going to have the tight end taking as much. And also, you're not going to have a wide receiver 4 on that team. You're not going to have a wide receiver 5 taking anything. The target share is so damn concentrated between those top 3 guys, and who would have a higher ceiling if an injury were to go down in front of them? I just think that the Cincinnati Bengals are locked into being a top 5 to 10 passing offense, no matter what happens, even if you had a Chase or a Higgins injury. Now, our last wide receiver on this list is someone that's probably in the best situation you could ever map out. If I was going to be playing a video game and I wanted to set up my career for a wide receiver and I wanted to map out the perfect situation for him to be in, I would put him in an offense that had very efficient quarterback play, that was possibly going to lead the NFL in pace of play, that was possibly going to lead the NFL in passing rate over expectation. So there's a crap ton of passing volume and there's nobody else to go to. That's what I would set up. And here you have the former wide receiver 1B on this team gone. You have the former wide receiver 3 injured. You have the wide receiver 4 gone. The wide receiver 4 replacement they bring in is injured. So Jalen Tolbert is stepping up into a guaranteed top 2 wide receiver role here for the Dallas Cowboys. And on top of this, we know he's going to be almost guaranteed that wide receiver 3 slot, even when Michael Gallup comes back from injury, which we don't know exactly when that's going to be. So this is the perfect situation set up for a Mr. Jalen Tolbert. However, I have found myself over the past month never drafting the man in maybe a single league. Because if we go through, at the end of the day, I know it's so boring, guys. I know you don't want me to talk about it. I know it's about the most lame thing I could ever say. But sometimes a fantasy football just comes down to picking the players with talent. And if we're looking at Jalen Tolbert, this is someone that has been moving ahead of Garrett Wilson in drafts. I have seen Jalen Tolbert be drafted 20+ picks before Garrett Wilson. It doesn't happen every time, but if we're even looking at some of the other players that you have Jalen Tolbert going before, a Darrell Henderson, a George Pickens, I mean, guys that, in my opinion, do have real upside where Jalen Tolbert has a perfect situation, but at the end of the day, he's a wide receiver out of South Alabama that had to stay in school all 4 years. Probably a good situation that we're going to miss out on. But thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know y'all probably didn't. Please go to the comment section. Let me know how stupid I am. But that's all I got for you. I really hope you go down there, drop a like, subscribe. And of course, if you want to draft with us in the live stream tonight or just have some fun, draft in a public lobby, draft with your friends, go sign up for Underdog. You can find the link in the description. Make a $10 deposit, match dollar for dollar up to 100. So it's essentially free. And you're also going to get our rankings. You're also going to get our draft guide. That's all I got for you. I appreciate you. And I will be drafting with you in the live stream tonight.